And just double checking.
Should be live.
Awesome. Yeah, we're live. Welcome everyone to another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is January 26, 2022. We'll be following along in the agenda that was posted in the RFCs repo, NPM RFCs repo, which was number 517. And I'll quickly share for folks who don't have it yet, the meeting notes link, and poked a couple folks in Slack channels. Feel free to jump in whenever you can. Quick reminder, this call, as well as all interactions on the RFCs repos, are covered under Code of Conduct. We ask that you please be mindful and thoughtful as other people are speaking. Please raise your hands on these calls if you'd like to jump in, and we'll call upon you to speak. And as is usual, give some time for announcements. The one that we've had here for the last couple of weeks on our radar is the OpenJS World Conference, which is still looking for proposals, talk proposals. Please check that out. The CFP, I think, closes in mid-February or early February. That's a conference that most of our team tends to go to. They have collaborator summits there, and we get together with other folks that contribute back to NPM, as well as other working groups as well. Oh, thanks, Owen. So yeah, it closes on February 14th is the last day to get your proposal in. Hopefully folks from our team will be joining that conference, either speaking or just joining virtually or in person, hopefully. Great. Any other announcements folks want to share? If not, then we can just dive right into the agenda. It's pretty small today, and there's a couple things that we might want to cut from this. The first up is the deprecating packages and UX revamp. Roy, this is RFC number 516. Did you want to speak to this?
Sure. Yeah, it's a long time coming. This is something that was surfaced last year. So just finally got to write the proper RFC to explain it, but it's a nice thought exercise. You can look at the rendered RFC. Let me paste the link here. But basically, it's about replacing the deprecation warnings that we get printed during the install. That is kind of like the last step in kind of the work we've been doing to just clean up the install experience altogether. It's been a long time coming. So we've been favoring adding the notifications at the end. So as we do for audit, as we did for fund when we introduce it. So it would basically replace any deprecation warning that just gets printed directly to the standard output into a nice notification at the end, just saying, okay, you have 3 deprecated packages in your install. And then giving the option to the user to do different action to maybe check for an overview of all the deprecation notices that were basically bubbled up during the install. But when I was writing that RFC, I got to start thinking, yeah, what should that interface look like? So for the sake of a first pass here, I just left it as just the same thing you would get during the NPM install phase, that same list, just decluttered a little bit so that it doesn't have the warning deprecated, like written in the prefix of every line. So it's a little bit cleaner on that regard, but it's basically the package name, version, and then that message that the package author can leave when they decide to deprecate a package. So yeah, that's the first pass. I left it just as the list, and then I imagine that, like, ideally, we probably want to augment or just improve the existing commands to maybe help surface better the deprecation. So I suggested here that maybe we expand npm ls, npm explain to also add information about a deprecated package. So if you're running in npm ls because you like to check on the state of your tree install, then you can notice right away, oh, this package is deprecated. Why? Then you can go deep for it. So yeah, instead of, we can also go a different route, maybe try to have a different command that can just explain more about the deprecation. But I think the explain and ls do a good job already of showing you where you're getting that dependency from. So maybe that's probably what we want to use, and just have some sort of, so there's the option of either having it as a top level command, like I think in the RFC here, I named it like npm deprecations, but not in love with it, open to anything that can be better. But it can be either a top level command like deprecations in this case that prints a list, or maybe just part of a different command under a flag or something. But basically it's the idea, okay, getting that overview list from somewhere, and then and there's the call to action at the end of the install, and then you can dig more into it. So that's it. I see that Jordan is not here, but he already left a good comment on the RFC, mentioning that we might just want to limit it to direct dependencies. It might be a good one, but I think that there are arguments to be made both ways. So I like to hear different opinions, but yeah, because maybe now we have overrides. Now you actually can do something about it. But before that, there was nothing really you could do about deprecated transitive dependencies, right? So yeah, I'm also open, happy to hear some opinions.
So I don't know if overrides would actually help for deprecated packages unless there's like a direct fork that has the same API, right? As far as, you know, overriding transient dependencies. But I think that's interesting. My immediate thought is, you know, I don't think we need a dedicated command. I also don't think that we need a global flag. I think, you know, long term we're looking at being able to surface certain packages easier in general. So I think we need to think in terms of that. And Darcy and I have been talking about that for a while. So, but I do like the output. I think it's less scary. And then, you know, this kind of also goes along with audit, in that, you know, when something's installed globally, we probably don't need to hear about dev dependencies for audit or for deprecations, but maybe within as a dependency or a transient dependency, depending. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, so I like this a lot. I appreciate you codifying this, Roy, because I think I gave this feedback in another issue a while ago, and even just like saying, yeah, we can consolidate these warnings. Like Fritzy said, it's less scary for your end users. A lot of people complain about the deprecation warnings to us still. They're the last piece, as you say, Roy, like that are remaining here. I do think that because they're currently like set up as warnings, this is kind of like a log level issue. Like maybe these could still live even during install, but that if they're somehow were attached to a different log level, like, or we somehow said that, you know, warnings could be suppressed by default on install, then maybe that doesn't matter to people. I think you have the right idea that this information is going to be, there's going to be people that want to know about this, but they're going to be in search of it, right? So hiding it by default makes sense. I would not say, again, probably adding to what Fritzy's saying, a separate command for this doesn't make sense. Like the npm, what did you call it? npm deprecations. I don't think that's necessarily necessary at all, but definitely npm ls, npm explain, and potentially npm outdated would be right places for this information to live. npm outdated especially is interesting because like there might be a reason why you want to see deprecated packages in the output of npm updated, because it's almost, people are running that as a warning to be like, okay, which versions do I have to update, right? Now, in the case of a deprecation, it's like this potentially might be, deprecations can happen within release lines. They can happen, somebody could add a new package, still a new version of that package that is actually not deprecated, right? So deprecations can happen. They don't happen across the entire package version set, right? So at any time somebody could release an undeprecated version of that package, right? So it's interesting because maybe you want to see like that information or deprecated package in npm outdated because you have to switch to a new package altogether, right? Like you're like, oh, I want to see that warning here because it's like, oh, that this is just as bad as if it's out of date. In fact, it's worse. It's like a worse signal, right? It's like I'm gonna have to go from node fetch to now Axios because they've dropped, they're deprecating the CommonJS support or something like that, right? Like so yeah, I think npm outdated, npm ls might make sense. And in terms of the transitive dependencies that Jordan was referencing, we can get around that because we already have that capability with all, right? So by default, we'll show you the scope for in those existing commands. By default, we'll show you the just top level dependencies, direct dependencies. And then if you pass -- all, then it's like, okay, well, now I want to see all the deprecated dependency. So we already have that capability today. So it's just about where that information lives. So I think npm updated and potentially npm ls are the right places. npm explain, that gets into territory where I think, oh my, well, if we're going to put that kind of metadata into npm explain, why don't we put audit information into npm explain? Why don't we put all this other kind of metadata into npm explain? And I don't,
maybe it is a good idea.
Well, that gets into the realm of territory where, yes, like there's a lot of work that we're going to want to do to, it's in order to support that. That's a lot of work, and I think there's a better mechanism for that coming down the line. Yeah, but that's my 2 cents on this. I think it's a great change in the very immediate features, something quickly we can do. We don't have to completely refactor the entire UI UX right now. Let's just take this incremental step and make people happy, like, very, very soon. So
yeah, I agree with sending the inline log messages to a different log level and having the summary there. So we keep the functionality. We're just changing the log level, and we still surface the information, maybe just not obviously in as much detail. So I like that.
Go ahead, Luke.
My one thought about the log level is, what if we could still wrap it up all by default and show it at the end, but what if we kept top level dependencies as warnings in case people are relying on that behavior, and made transitive deprecations what's below, like silly or verbose, somewhere in there. And that would give, my only concern is people who are maybe relying on this behavior unknowingly of like, hey, every time I run npm install, I get these deprecations that I should really get to someday. And we move that information, and they'll still be able to see it if they read like the new output. But ideally, they would want to get to these like sooner rather than later. So I feel like hiding top level ones since it's a change in behavior, I could go either way on that. But that was just my one thought. And I had one other thought, which is like probably further down the line breaking change, but I do feel like security audit, outdated, and deprecations all are like similar. Like, is there a command that you could run that says, show me everything in my tree that I should not be depending on for some reason or another, whether it's insecure, been marked by a CVE, been marked by a deprecation, or just it's outdated and there's new versions since then. Like to me, that's, you know, if we could rewrite everything, like that's technically an audit. I want to audit my package tree. Audit doesn't necessarily mean security, but I don't see that as a change we're going to make anytime soon to audit displaying more information. But that's just a higher level thought that I had too.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Oh, where I would quickly just push back on the showing some warnings and not others. We don't do that with like audit advisories. So exactly what you're saying. So like, and we don't do that with like installed packages, right? So the type of information what we're showing right now for deprecated packages seems to be very unique and not like, it doesn't seem like we don't show for direct deps that like an inline message or warning that there's a CVE against one of those. We just show the consolidated view of that data at the very end. And I would say that that's actually takes a higher precedent than the deprecation warning would, right? So I would say that like the consolidated view is probably the ideal. And then yeah, like we can continue to maybe log that information, but I don't know if it exists now in like NPM outdated. I don't actually know how much value it adds. I think it just will create noise in your logs for people that especially want to maybe be using a different log level to be trying to debug problems, because deprecation warnings are just that, like they aren't actually actionable. Like NPM outdated like is probably where we want that to live, or NPM update, or like, you know, NPM audit is like the right place. Like when you're doing NPM install, it's like, okay, like I wanted, maybe you wanted that deprecated version of that thing, right? You were meaningfully installing it. Are we going to warn you about that? You know, is an interesting like balance. Roy, I saw your hand was up. Did you want to say something?
I was going to speak directly to that comment you made. Like if, yeah, audit might be much more important, right? If there's a CV that affects a direct dependency, like you could claim that you would want that printed in the log warning during the install. But yeah, I think the idea here with the UX is really to have the user as notifications at the end, and the user can take actions later.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Those are all good points. Yeah, I do see that as, you know, deprecations shouldn't be treated specially as a special case when we have numerous reasons why you wouldn't want to install something. So, and showing it on every install has always bothered me, especially for ones where it's like, you know, the example in the RFC, I feel like I've seen all of those many times.
Yeah, we get a lot of people asking us to change this. This is something that would, I think, just make a lot of people happy. So great. And to your kind of longer term view and approach, Luke, about consolidating this in one place, I think we're going to get there with ideally maybe that query concept that we've been mulling around internally, and a more standardized view of like package information, right? Or package node, like nodes. Okay, cool. Any other feedback on this, or are we kind of good to? I would maybe want to flush out just like which other commands what they would look like. Maybe npm audit. The ls version here makes sense to me. I think we would want to maybe drop the npm explain one. I'm not sure, like, unless that information is readily available and we can easily do it, then fine, I would leave it. But yeah, I think npm ls might be the better place, because we do show other kind of status. Like the reason why I'm saying that is that npm ls does have a historical some metadata attached to the dependency, whether it's an extraneous dep, if it's what's the other like states.
Yeah, there's like missing or unmet. There's a bunch of status.
There's bundled. I think there's bundled.
Yeah,
Bundled.
yeah.
That we should
Also
now
when
show.
it's
So
deduped,
deduped, right? So yeah, so there might be a case where we want to show this state, but I'm also a bit concerned that LS is going to become the dumping ground for these states without without like properly thinking about how that actually, like the UI of that, how that's going to change. Like, is this comma separated now if something's deprecated and deduped, or is it, you know, deprecated, deduped, and bundled? What do all three of those states look like together? Yeah, it's just interesting because in your example here, Roy, you only show deprecated alongside those, but there's potential for like something to be multiple states, right? So
Yeah,
it'd
and
be
there's
good to see.
no, yeah. There's no extra color code here, but we could also do something more visual. Maybe attach some symbol, attach some color to it, so that it highlights better.
Yeah, this harkens back to a conversation that's been going on since we've been running these RFCs, which Wesley Todd has poked on, and he hasn't been here for a while. But he essentially said, you know, are these not these different views like npm ls outdated? Are they not just different views of the same information, right? So and audit as well, like npm audit is a good example of just like, you know, extra, just a different slice of the same information that we're bubbling up. So like if I just was able to run npm ls and then it showed me all this extra metadata, like, oh, this is also vulnerable, right? Like it'd be nice to see that state as well on ls, right? Like, so I think we get into the territory of like, you know, scope creep if beyond what the problem I think this RFC is trying to fix right now. But yeah, if you could at least maybe expand on this to show what npm outdated would look like, because I think that's the one I would expect this information to live in most, at least personally. That's the one command I could see this being most closely aligned to. And then yeah, let's ship this. Let's make this change. Like, I don't want to see any more. The number one thing that I heard in this conversation from Fritzy is what I've heard from other people, especially maintainers, is that it's scary for some people, right? It's scary for new users to see all this output, these warnings, and they can't do anything about it, right? Like a lot of the transitive dependency warnings for that, they can't upgrade, right? Like a maintainer has to go upgrade that depth, right? Potentially, right? We'll do our best and give you the best like greenfield for greenfield, the best version that is within like the Semver range. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think if we were to really try to cut a little bit more the scope here, then we should really focus only on the notification at the end of the install, changing the log level. Maybe it's just log level verbose or info, that one that doesn't get printed automatically, right, by default. And what is the call to action, right? Do we introduce a new top level command, or what is the call to action at the end if the user wants to list the list of deprecations in the current install? Maybe we should just focus on that.
Yeah, because you're saying you're losing information because deprecations come with like the actual description. It's a good call out, because we don't actually know. We don't have, none of the existing commands have a place for that kind of description.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what my head was going with the new top level command, just to surface that list.
Why are you making me think about this? I mean, I don't know if we want to support another top level command specifically for this state. Like, it's just a state, but
the same defenders. Yeah, there's no place.
No, well, think about this. How do you deprecate a package today?
There is a top level command, right?
Right. So there's no all encompassing npm update and then you change the state deprecate. That would be really like, you know, even though maybe under the hood we're actually doing a push and we're actually, it is like a deprecate action is actually pretty much like a push with like a new state to the package, which is saying this is deprecated. We as the CLI have a top level command for deprecating. So why not have a top level command for listing the deprecated versions? So I'm actually.
Well, maybe we can just nest it there. Maybe we can just do npm deprecate list. That's it.
The problem is that you get into because the top level command supports positional arguments for values. You get into the problem that like we don't have the ability to create a subcommand within deprecate. So we have to make it a flag, and flags as commands. I'm always very like, I don't know. I'm wary of that because it's not, doesn't align with what the intent of the original command was. Right, deprecate is specifically there to deprecate things. So I'm actually coming full circle now. A new deprecations top level command removes the need to add that information to any other view right now. At least we don't have to like find a way to shoehorn deprecation warnings into that. You can piggyback off of like the existing flags, like we'll show you top level direct dependency deprecations first. And then if you pass -- all, we'll show you all of them with transitives. And then,
okay. So no arcs? What is the?
I think so. Imagine it's just like ls. So you run npm deprecations, it'll give you the same kind of like list of however we want to visualize this. This is kind of like up for, you know, some interpretation by you, but it would show you top level dependencies that are deprecated by default, and then the description of why they were deprecated. So kind of similar to what we have today. And then if you pass the -- all flag, that would give you transitives as well. You could then take that information like that dependency name and package name and the version, and then run ls to figure out why it's there, or to run it against explain if you want to like dig in further. But
yeah, maybe something like that. But when you were talking, I kind of misunderstanding what you're saying. But then I realized if you run npm deprecate no args, it just throws. So maybe we can just pick that, and that becomes the list now.
I don't know. No. I think that the name, the name, unfortunately, that's like getting into like, for like, that's a verb. It's like an action, deprecate. I think that's, I'd have a hard time telling people to run npm deprecate, and it's going to list all the like, that sounds scary if we're talking about easing people's minds.
Yeah.
Cool. I know we've spent a lot of time on this, but yeah, if you could maybe update the RFC a little bit. Let's maybe remove the status information on ls and explain. Like if people want to know about deprecations, they can run this top level command. We'll remove the warnings by default. I'm 50-50 in terms of whether we keep them just at a different log level. We don't do that, like I said before, we don't do that with any other kind of audit advisory or you know, like we don't do that at all. So it'd be interesting why we would want to like continue to store those in the logs. Yeah.
Good.
Cool. Okay. Moving on to this PR 4260. This was not created by Fritzy. This is an arborist, adding an arborist reify hook. This is sort of in line. This is, I think, was created by the team at White Source, who have poked me internally about trying to get something like this implemented into NPM again. There's a whole string of conversations that have been had around NPM v7s, breaking change of removing hook scripts. So we didn't really do a great job at explaining that this was a breaking change. We might have at some point put it in a line item, noted it to, Node.js or other folks, but it really wasn't like I think really popularized, or we didn't. The number one breaking change for a lot of folks in V7 was peer deps. So hook scripts, unfortunately, fell out. We stopped supporting them because of a major refactor to the way that npm resolves your trees, and that came with it, an inability really to distinguish between certain lifecycle events that we wanted to fire off. And we've had the conversation on and off for about a year now about introducing a new lifecycle event that might encapsulate or bring back some level of support for a tree mutated event, or something has happened, please fire off an event. There's definitely the concept that we have internally right now of like sort of a reserved time in which we don't expect to be anything to mutate, package JSON or anything to happen. And we're getting closer and closer, I think, to the point in which we can say we will have sort of immutable installs once we have, once we stop supporting install scripts and have other mechanisms in place for the ecosystem to distribute, distributions or variants of packages. So I'm very wary to, plus one something like this to say that we want to add back any kind of like hooks into Arborist today without having that broader discussion. And Fritzy, I know you've already started a work in progress RFC for refactoring kind of like and trying to bring more context to when scripts are being run. And the two contexts that come up the most are the package being installed versus the project that's installing the package. Those are the two sort of contexts we see the most. And this is definitely one of those cases where they are, I think, a maintainer of a project which used to rely on these hooks to sort of do some interesting things to protect their users or to analyze the packages being installed, and they've sort of lost that ability. And so their hope is to get something like this soon, some sort of hook into back into npm as it's processing the installation of packages. So I apologize that they weren't able to join, but my hope is that we can have some good async discussion and probably in this PR itself. So
yeah. I think long term, if we were to prioritize, immutable installs, we could have an output option for install that generates a report that gives them enough information to go back in and call Arborist directly to do the mutation that they want to do, or to analyze the changes that were made. So I think if we do everything as an after effect, like, hey, you ran install, this isn't a hook, but here you're piping the output to something that you then use and do something with, that's fine, right? I don't know. I think there's a lot of ways we can solve this without hooks, but in the long term, in the short term, right, we need to get to the point where Arborist itself is internally immutable, right? So the state's very clear. So
yeah, this kind of also ties into when we shipped overrides, or I think we were just leading up to shipping overrides. A few people in the community had asked us whether or not we were going to support patching dependencies, which is something that other package managers do support, like floating, like git patches, like to change essentially the contents of a package after it's been installed. And this, I think, is a concept and like a feature that I don't know if we'll, personally, I would be very wary of us, supporting. The whole idea, I think, behind installation, and my understanding of is, if we can just untar a package for you in place, that's it. That's what the extent of where I think we should end, installation ends. And after that, we're getting into the territory of people mutating packages that no longer, that almost breaks the contract of the package as it was distributed, right? So post install scripts obviously were, and install scripts in general are a way to like, you know, mutate a package once it's on your system. And people will probably still want to do that to some extent, and will still want to do things once they have your software on there. But I think we should be really focused on like just delivering by default a like reproducible build and install sort of experience for people first and foremost. Go ahead, Miles.
Yeah, so I guess one thing of throwing out there is like some of the package managers that support patching. And I haven't reviewed all of the language specific package managers for this, but the first one that comes to mind would be something like the Debian project, or a lot of open, like a lot of distributions that are operating system distributions as opposed to language distributions. And in those cases, the patches make sense because essentially we're saying like there's a philosophy in Debian, for example, where the packager is not the same as the author of the source code. So the patches that are being floated are generally like compatibility patches. A great example of this in a way, but not exactly, is like how the Node.js project works, because we vendor all of our dependencies into Node proper, and we actually float a bunch of patches on them, whether it's V8 or OpenSSL or stuff like that. We do float a bunch of patches. So I think that in the world of NPM, where the packages are being published by the author and those who own the source tree, patching doesn't make a ton of sense in the same capacity at the same level. And I think that something like overrides, and Fritzy, I didn't see if that's what you were just saying or anything, but like something like overrides very well could play that role, because it's easy for you to have like your own version of the package. Git also offers, you know, some utilities around this, and maybe there's things to be thought about. But like a post install script can apply a patch against an application. And I think there's a huge difference between the package installer attempting to include patches that are part of their install versus the package distributor trying to have patches that are kind of like part of the distribution itself.
Yeah, it's just like when you hook in there is the dangerous part, right? So when you allow somebody to apply the patch, or when it's being like, you know, changing, do I get a chance to change package JSON while, you know, NPM is reading, or, you know, like, you know, when those lifecycle events fire is the interesting part for sure. Like it's, so it's definitely one of those places where we're like, well, let's just do this as late as we can and only once. So that's the idea of like something as like tree mutation event has happened, and maybe like reification event has happened, like the entire tree has been resolved, the entire tree is placed, you know, like that to me seems like the two type of events that we would like make the most sense, and would be the most sense to like support as well, because otherwise you get into like just crazy sort of use cases that folks are currently trying to, you know, prevent. Like there's a whole bunch of tooling I think that exists that's trying to prevent and intercept packages as they're being installed, and there's now ways to prevent that using overrides, or you know, again, like just making the NPM advisor DB that much better, or having our team, you know, the registry team, continue to ensure that there's no malware actually on the registry to get into your projects is important. So anyways, this is going to stay open for a while, I think. And hopefully we can have a good conversation with those folks once they get back on here. Yeah. Let's quickly move on. I know we only have about 15 minutes left. The two next items I think we talked about last week, and I think we had action items related to them that we should follow up. So this is the 511, removing NPM shrink wrap from list of unignorable files. I think we all agreed on next steps there. So it's just a matter of creating tickets. I think that's on me to do. And then the PR 4227. So changing the default save prefix from caret to none. This is something we'll probably close with some feedback from last week as well. This is not something we're going to change. I think the last one is the one that should take most of our time here. This is the RFC 343. Roy, this was originally proposed by you. We had some good discussion last year about this. And of course, a year later, we are now looking back and saying, oh, we probably should have done something more in this space. So I'm not sure if you want to provide a quick synopsis of what this was and sort of what we're doing to fix this.
Sure. Yeah, this is I'd say a major quality of life upgrade to workspaces, which is basically the thing that as a user, I always wanted, and I see a lot of people struggling, assuming that this is the case, and it's not, which is the ability of just cd into a folder that is a workspace currently in your project and running commands there, assuming that everything will just work as you expect as a user. So that has a, there's a big gap, which I think is primarily due to the way that the original implementations from Lerna, from Yarn work with the workspaces, which they would do the automatic switching. So if you inside workspace A, which is a workspace within your monorepo, and you run an npm install that you want to add a dependency there, everything was, the package will be added to the package JSON there. It will be properly locked at the root level. And currently that's not the case with the npm CLI. So currently with the workspaces implementation we have today, you always have to run from the root or specify the root as the prefix for your project. And you need to specify where is the workspace that you want to operate in, and then you install a new dependency, or you can do you can run a script, use other top level npm commands. So this is, it's been a while, and there was a lot of back and forth. So originally there was a lot of push to be more explicit, to avoid the hazards of magically trying to figure out whether you're inside a workspace folder within a monorepo project that has workspaces configured. But now, I guess, with more adoption and we're getting more and more feedback, our own team starting to use more and more workspaces, I think that we come to the realization that in this case, it's going to be a much, much better user experience to just have it be more magic. Like it's just more reasonable too at the end of the day. So I think the hazards of running it like that do not outweigh the benefits of doing the magic and just running as the user intends when they're running from a workspace. So basically the RFC, I just cleaned it up, but it's basically we're going back to the original proposal there.
Go ahead, Fritzy.
Yeah, just to kind of summarize where we're going, we have a PR that's approved. It hasn't landed yet. That when you're in a workspace directory, by default, the command will run as if you had specified that workspace, and it auto detects the prefix. If you want to disable that behavior and use the old behavior, then you will either use -- no workspaces, or you will specify a prefix. So in either case, you could specify the current directory as the prefix. So in either case, that would do the old behavior. We treated this as undefined behavior, meaning we don't need to do we don't think we need to do a major version bump in order to clarify this. So yeah, because this is what users expect when you're in a working directory and you run a workspace directory and you run a command. They expect it to work as if you had specified that directory or that workspace name as a workspace. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
go ahead.
Yeah, I guess the only particularity there is there was a lot of just overall activity in that RFC with a bunch of comments suggesting we would go a different direction. But it's been a long while, and yeah, now that we're actually working on it, implementing it, we're going to the direction of the original proposal there.
Yeah, so I just copy and pasted one liner there for setting the workspaces false globally with npm config. I'm wondering if that's an option for those power users that like truly don't want to opt back into the behavior where unless I define the workspaces key or I do explicit definition for workspaces and opting in, then I want to opt out of this behavior. That's a potential. I think that might be a potential option for them. So like, I think Jordan and maybe even Wes, Jordan, I think maybe Isaac at the time last year were pushing against this. And that's when we started to discuss potential other options like npm RC files that would have references to like the path to the root and all this kind of like configuration that, you know, seemed prescriptively hard for the average user that I think has this assumption. So now maybe if we can provide some sort of easy opt out, like what I just provided, I'm not sure if that will actually work, but it'd be good to just like, you know, document that for folks if they do want to opt out of that behavior, I guess. Like I'm not sure what the documentation looks like, Fritzy, for that PR, but it might be good just to provide like a how-to addition to workspaces. Because there should be some sort of documentation about how we're going to start walking up and when we, you know, almost like the pseudocode version of nodes require algorithm that lives there. We should have something similar that, you know, maps how workspaces are going to determine whether or not, you know, you're executing within a workspace project, right?
Yeah, and in general, I think that the documentation needs to be much more explicit, and like right now I think workspaces are kind of mentioned in context in a few places in the docs, but we need like a dedicated home for like the topic and things like this.
Yeah, we do have a section for under using npm dedicated for workspaces, but I think that yeah, like that might be a good place to put this section, like the workspace algorithm, yeah, or something like that. Yeah, cool. I think that leaves us with some extra time, about 5 minutes left. If folks had any other topics they want to bring up, right?
Well, we do want to approve this, right? Since the implementation appears to be landing soon.
Yeah, I think that we do want to +1 this, and yeah, I will give the +1. Actually, let me quickly review this afternoon first, and then just because I know you made a couple edits, and then let's ratify it.
Sounds great.
Cool. Any other topics folks want to bring up? If not, I'll give you a few minutes back today and look forward to chatting with you all next week. Cheers.
Yeah.